Hey, so yesterday we left off making the storage solution for our event store. So today we need to continue on that, which is partially done at the moment. At the moment we've got saving of events and loading of events for an aggregate, and we just need to add in projections. Now we already have a projection base class, I think, projection, and this consume method, which is what we're going to use to trigger them all. And somehow in our in-memory session we need to call all the projections. Now I'm not entirely certain how I want to structure this yet, but I am thinking that it should only happen when you commit the events. At which point we'll run all of the events that are pending and run them through all the projections. Now, as with the type builders for the aggregates, we're going to pass it in through the constructor. So we have builders, our store events, and let's put the projections here. So an IEnumerable of projection, I think. And actually, let's take an array of projections instead, because we're going to repeatedly iterate over it, and we want a fixed list. We don't want anyone to be able to add to it later. So that, and then the rough idea. Oh, there's a bug. Let's fix the bug first, I think. Just undo all of that. Right. So we have a little bug in here, in that the fact when commit is called twice, because we're not actually clearing out our list of pending events. So if we do, let's create a toggle, save it, and then we can do this. We can take our event store, we can say commit, we're not going to check specifically what the events are, we'll just say count should be 2. And then to actually demonstrate the bug, we will do session.commit again. No, we need to clear this out first. Event store toggle ID clear. So this time after we've committed, that should be empty, because we've committed all the events, they've been written to the database, and the fact that we've cleared out the database underneath the hood, when we commit again, nothing else should come through. But I believe this will fail at the moment. Yep, it had 2 items in it, and that's because after we commit, what we need to do is clear our pending events. So now if we were to rerun that test, Better. Right. So let's commit that. Git add updated only. Yep. In memory session, we clear out pending events on commit. Right, now that we've done that, we can go back to what we were planning on doing. So that was our array of projections. Projections. Introduce a read-only field of that. And now in our commit method. So what we want is all of the events. I'm not going to deal with ordering of them as such, because your projections should handle the fact that they're not in order. We might have to look at ordering for aggregates of the same type. Actually, no, we shouldn't. The only order we care about are the events for a specific aggregate. We wouldn't want to run a toggle switched on method event before a toggle created event, because that would make no sense. But as we already have the order of those guaranteed, we don't care about the actual aggregate order itself. So events for projection equals pending events select many. So this flattens collections, so we can say the pairs value. So every aggregate that's in the collection has a list here of events, and by doing select many we will end up with one enumerable of events. That's all of the events for all the aggregates. And then we just say projection, we better to array that as well, as we don't want to repeatedly iterate this. Right, let's do that. And then we say for each projection, we don't need to have that, so we can just do projection.consume. Beginning to think it might be nice to have an overload to that, which takes in an enumerable of events. But for the time being, for each events for projection, and then we can say projection consume event. Now, at the moment, this is synchronous. So you call commit, and this will block until all of the projections are run. In the future, we might want to look at getting this list synchronously, and then kicking off a background thread or similar, maybe a task, to actually do the projection. If you end up with a lot of projections happening, then you might need to do this for performance reasons. But to start with, we can keep it simple and just do it synchronously. Alright, we should get some build errors because I've added a constructor argument. Oh, that's nice, not to show it full size. So our session now takes in projections. And we will need some projections. So projections equals a new list of projection. And as always, that can be read-only. And we'll follow our convention above and have public void register projection. I don't need anything generic for this either. underscore projections dot add projection, and let's put that on the interface as well. Delete that. Right, now we should still get compile errors because we've now fixed the main project, but the tests make instances, so those will break as well. Yeah, I've required a list and I've got an array. Yeah, I've required an array and I've got a list. So let's use a list, just so that we don't have to create more arrays every time we create instances of things. Do that. And I'm not being particularly aware of the amount of allocations I'm making while doing this, but there's no point going list.toArray every time we start a session. At least not yet. Maybe there is in the future. Right, and now our test errors. Yeah, we'll make projections available here as well. Private read-only. Oh, I haven't made any of those read-only. How naughty of me. List projection. Projections. Let's just mark all of these read-only as well. Builders, event store, projections equals new list. And let's do projections. Thank you for removing that parameter. Exactly what I wanted. Right. So nothing should have actually broken the tests, because we've not got any projections to run. But we do have an empty array, or an empty list. Yep. Good, those will work. So continuing the whole commit a little on commit often, commit updated stuff. Yep. So in memory session, you know what, let's write the tests through it before committing it. Because, you know, then we can commit working code. Right, when there is a projection, we don't need to test when there isn't a projection because all of the other tests cover that. So our projection equals new, was it all toggles? Yep, that's our all toggle projection. And we'll say session dot, we already have the list passed in, so we just need to add this to the projections. Like that. And now let's create a toggle. Create new. Doesn't return anything for that. Has a name of projected and a description of yes. And we shall add that to the session. And we shall then commit the session. And now our projection should be it's a list of key value pairs, is it? Yeah. New key value pair, give it string, and we then take the toggle ID and the toggle name. Still can't format the document, that's nice. So I'll do it manually. Right, and with luck, this will work. Ooh, nice. Do we need any other tests for it? Probably add a test to make sure that multiple toggles work. When there's projection with multiple aggregates. So we'll just do that. This can be first, this can be second, save first, session save second, and we'll change their names to be first and second. So this should now be first ID, first name, and then second ID and second name. Cool, good. Good to add. Alright, so if we just diff what's pending, there's that with some bad white space there and there. Diff, yep. Add updated things only. Yep. Get CM in memory session implement projections. Actually, let's say implement synchronous projections. Synchronous. Is that how you spell it? I think so. Oh well, I know what I mean. Even if I can't type it. Right. So now that we have projections working, we can now move back onto the class that I've been ignoring from committing, which is our storage. That'll do for the storage interface for the time being, I think. Things like connection strings and such will be an implementation detail of this, of the actual implementations. So if this was a Postgres storage, you'd probably take in an NPG SQL connection in the constructor. But it's not, it's just an in-memory one. I'm not going to expose the backing store to anyone. Yeah, about the only thing I'm not happy about is that, which is too wide. I don't pay a hard amount of attention to line widths, but I still don't think they should be too wide. Remove unused? No, let's move it to its own file. Right. So, some tests for our in-memory storage. Now we could, to some level, cheat. We could just take all of these tests and re-implement them. But we then wouldn't have access to this stuff. But we're using that to actually test that the session works. So we should only need a fairly light amount of tests for this. I'm not sure how I'm going to verify some of them yet. I can't remember what it's called. There we are. Class in memory storage tests. Underscore storage equals new in memory storage. Right. So we need to be able to check that when we register things like projections, they actually get registered. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. Because if we do this, in fact, when a projection is registered, and we need to check that an aggregate is registered as well, but when an aggregate is registered, yeah, so storage.register projection new all toggles. Storage.register builder events toggle.create new with some kind of ID which we still haven't thought about. Probably shouldn't have implemented that straight away. Create new, no, that's not right. Load from events. Right, so how do you check that that's actually worked? Because if we go to our in-memory storage, we're not actually exposing any of this stuff. What is that problem? Or is this just Rider being silly? It all builds Rider's being silly. Right. So yeah, we're not exposing these anywhere except for this in-memory session, which then in turn doesn't expose things that it's passed through its constructor. So how do we check that registering one actually passes it? Useless. Right. Well, the aggregate we can check by trying to load one. And if there isn't one registered, we won't be able to construct it and it will chuck an error. So let's go to our tests and say fact when there isn't any aggregates registered, we need to assert that it does fail. So var using var session equals storage.begin session session.load aggregate toggle goad.new ID, doesn't matter what it is. This should throw an exception. Should throw, what was the type of not supported exception? Yeah, we really need to wrap that in something more explicit. Missing a bracket? Yeah. So, by consequence, doing this here should throw a key not found exception. Because we'll be able to construct the aggregate, but we don't actually have any data for it to build. That's not a very pleasant test. But I can't think of better ideas without doing partial mocking of the in-memory storage, and I don't want to do that. The other way you could do it is have something along the lines of a public func of all of this stuff. So a func of that. This is horrible. I'm not doing this. Just showing what you could do. And that. And finally, in memory session, build session, get set. And that horrible thing would be set like this build session equals builders event. No, was it builders projection? Stop that. And events new in memory session. Builders projections events. What? Oh, I got that the wrong way around. See, this is why this is a bad idea already. There. And then you could replace that with build session.invoke. And now, to test it, you could then do this. You could say storage.buildSession equals builders projections events substitute for I in memory session. Yeah, that's really horrible. I'm not doing that. There's value in test-driven development and writing things so they're testable. But when you start writing monstrosities like this line, you're doing it wrong. Let's take that back. Move that, put that back here. Much better. So exception-based testing then. So how are we going to verify that projection is there? Well, we can verify a projection exists by passing into its own variable, creating a session, session.save, toggle.createNew, some kind of user ID, test, nope, session.commit, projection.toggles should be new array of new key value pair. I can't be. I don't want to test all of that. We'll just do count should be 1. This is kind of testing by side effect, because I mean we're pretty dependent on the implementation of in-memory storage working, or in-memory session, sorry. If it doesn't work, 2 sets of tests will blow up, which is fine, but we are really expecting specific side effects of not being able to find builders. So it's not great, but yeah, it works. Interestingly, we could remove that commit, because it's going to do it on dispose anyway, so we could just have this. Hopefully that still works. Good. Right, let's commit that. Oh, no bad white space, that's a nice change. So, storage. Implement in memory storage. Now we're able to actually begin doing interesting things, because we can write an API that actually creates an aggregate in one request, so create a toggle, and then in another toggle or another request we'll switch it on, say. Without this we wouldn't have been able to write something like that. Well, we'd have been able to write something similar, but not so well structured. This means I need to actually figure out how to do ASP.NET Core. On the plus side, .NET Core 2 has just been released. On the downside, I don't think I have it installed. .NET version 1. Either way, we need to actually design what our API is going to look like. So, zoom in on this a bit. Oh, so we've completed the storage API and we've done an in-memory implementation. Haven't done that. Let's just commit that as well as part of the last commit. Oh. Right. So, to design an HTTP API. So, HTTP API. I'm not necessarily calling it RESTful because I'm not entirely certain of the definition of RESTful. Every time I ask or look up, it's different. So, it's an HTTP API, whether it's officially RESTful or not sure. So, we need some endpoints. You should always probably name your endpoints in a collective, so you can then say toggles1, for instance. In our case, we'll have an ID parameter of some form. So, get to this will return an array of toggles, which will probably have a name, an ID, a name, and a description, and activeness. The same request, but to a child root. So ID will return the same thing, but actually just one of them. Now I also want to support getting a toggle by name, because that's going to be something people are going to want to do, I would imagine. So how do you differentiate between an ID and a name? That is a name, that is not the name parameter. Dave. Yes. So that's going to return that. So we now have the choice. Do we want to do that and deal with the potential fun of a name clashing with an ID? Which is not very likely, because our IDs are going to be goods. So let's do an ID which is a good, and a name which is a string. Now if someone was feeling malicious, they could look up the ID for an existing toggle and then create a new toggle with the name that is that ID, and then you'd have an interesting routing issue. Which one of those would win? So I think we should actually do that. And then if later on we want to put other things there, we can. Now, we want to be able to switch on and switch off a toggle. Now, do we implement that as two separate post methods, or what? So you could either have something along the lines of post to toggles name and then you can either you could post active button like that, and you could also post active true. Or we can do the same kind of thing, but we'll say, oops, to switch on and off a toggle, we'll just do active, and you can post true or false to that. The only reason this becomes a concern, well, apart from trying to write a nice API, is that we'll end up with the same kind of structure for tags. And we're going to want to be able to add and remove tags, but I don't want to have to post the whole thing each time. So I think, at least with tags, you could do a patch request, maybe. Patch or put, perhaps. And here you'd have add some tags and remove other tag. See, the downside with designing APIs is trying to get this right, because refactoring an API is much harder than refactoring a domain model, in my opinion. Because if I refactor a domain model, that's just the internal workings of my service that I'm changing. If I refactor an HTTP API, that's my public surface. Other people could be using it. So you don't want to have to change this suddenly underneath their feet, because that will annoy people. If we go for this route of doing things, you'd end up with this. You'd have to say tags on that, because there's always the chance that someone would want to do many things at once. So tags that, and active is true. I think I prefer having it as its own endpoint. I'm trying to leave the API as having verbs, or having nouns in its name rather than verbs. You don't want to have, well, general advice is that you don't want to have something like this. add tag, because now you're just doing RPC. Decisions. Feels like trying to trade off bad things versus slightly different bad things. I think creating a toggle is nice and straightforward. Post to toggles, and you post name my first toggle and a description if you want one. And that will return you. Yeah, how did I do that? Shift Control 8 apparently. And that will return you. Is it 201 created? And that will return a URL. Probably let's use that as our primary. We'll say that by default that's the kind of style of URL you'll get. So the other thing I want to return here in our toggles is a links collection. Have self, which will be that. And then things like tags, which will be something, state, something else. And that's just the toggles namespace, which is admittedly going to be the hardest one to do because this is the one we're going to write back to. Our other namespaces that we'll need is going to be our statistics. So stats, and you could give it a toggle ID or stats for an environment. Stats for a tag, perhaps. And maybe a state as well. So you could pass. I'd actually write separate routes for these. Active and inactive, rather than true and false. Those ones are nice and easy to write because, you know, they're read-only. And what does a get to that URL return? So if you want to do get, I guess that's going to return something like active, true, links. Self will be something. Toggle will be the URL to the parent toggle. That's probably it. bothering me. This also all assumes that we can do these kind of routes with MVC. I haven't used MVC in quite a while, so well, not directly anyway. .NET Core. As it's 2.0, let's download it. .NET Core. 64-bit. Do I want the SDK or the run? Go away. Do I want the SDK or the runtime? SDK includes the runtime, command line tools for creating. Runtime does not include this. No, so we do want the SDK. Let's go for that one. Or do we just go for tools? Do I even have Visual Studio installed? Apparently so. I don't know which one I should go for. I have Visual Studio, but at the same time, I'm using Rider most of the time. I assume that adds the relevant stuff. Oh, I'll just go with that. I don't use Visual Studio much anyway. 3 minutes, right. Oh, well, back to grumbling about API routing then. The other option, rather than going down this route, is starting off with the actual UI itself. Sketching out what the UI should look like and building an API that suits the UI, but we will eventually come back to this. I think we will go with that. As long as I don't bump my semantic version to 1.0 before I'm happy, then I'm free to change things and break things. Now, the next question is what the structure of that should be. I'm not sure if there's a specific standard for linking these things, but what I'm thinking is we'll end up with a model. Let's stick it here. It's like a toggle response. So public class toggle response, which will have a public GUID ID get set. Let's do this C#. Right, so we'll have a get set on that. And then we will have a public string name, and a public string description, public bool active, and then we want the links. So I think for that we can use a dictionary of string links. And then there'll be some magic that'll do, links equals. Wow, that's interesting highlighting. Self. Somehow we will resolve that, not sure how. I would consider using the Nancy framework, but at the same time, the name irritates the hell out of me. No apparent reason, I just don't like it. Then again, I didn't like the Fubu MVC name either, but I used that a lot, so. No, let's not read documentation, let's just install things. What could possibly go wrong? Following applications are using files that need to be updated. .NET. It's probably Rider. You can try and close them. No idea what they are. Can't be that important. That might take some time. So we have an idea of model and we've got some basic URL structure. I guess then we will have a toggles controller and a stats controller. And I want to do some routing so that these end up going to the same, well, delegating to the same methods. I'm also going to try and use the CQRS style of handling these. So I don't know if you've tried using the mediator library before, but I'll be using that to create messages which can be passed around. We can then use the mediation library to write decorators, and the decorators will be how our sessions will be opened and committed. Oh, successful. .NET version. Oh, we do have 2.0 now. Good. Start. What I'm after really is an ASP.NET Core 2 getting started guide, which will be hopelessly out of date probably. August 7th. That's reasonably up to date. I mean, there's a NuGet package called Microsoft ASP.NET, and that's got a version 2, so maybe it's just installing that and magic will occur. I'm going to assume that I've got all the right stuff for that. That's not the kind of getting started I want. Oh, that might do. Right, let's see. CD source. Make directory Crispin API. CD API. .NET new web. I rather suspect we have files in all random places that we don't want. Tree. Oh no, actually that looks about right. Explorer. Yeah, that's fine. And then in there. Oh well, it might be fine. Add existing project. Something happening? Are we thinking about things? .NET Core is not fully supported. Some features will not work as expected. Which features? What am I expecting? Oh well. We shall muddle on. Let's have a look at what's in here. Presentation mode. There we go. Right. So we create a web host. That's got a lot of information. We use the startup class. So it's quite like ON then, but with a web host rather than having to go near IIS. And anything that keeps me far away from IIS is a good thing. I don't like IIS. Not enough text config files for my liking. Give me Nginx any day. Ah. Apparently this is going to take some time. Installing half of the internet, probably. Wonder if we could restore things quicker from the command line. Yep, it's downloading half the internet. What could possibly go wrong with doing that? What could even happen, apparently? What's the www root folder for? Beginning to think we might have to switch to Visual Studio for this. Oh, that is actually doing things. It is literally downloading half the internet. We have any updates available for Rider yet? No, right. You have good. Yes, I know it's not fully supported. You do keep telling me. Oh, running on localhost 5000. Ha! It worked. I mean, I'm not totally surprised at that. Obviously, I'm quite surprised. Right, how do we write a web API with this? Do we have to use web API? That says create web API. That sounds like a good place to start. Oh, something similar. Model, right, data access. No, go away. I don't. No. Just tell me what packages to install. Do not select enable Docker support. Ooh. Ah, that'll do me. I don't know what that stuff is, but that might be useful. That sounds hopeful anyway. Let's see what's in our project file actually. F4, yeah. Netcore app 2. Or they're only using Netcore app 1.1. Right, let's see what's available in NuGet. Ooh, that looks like it's half in presentation mode. Although we are not in presentation mode. Wow. Ironically, it looks better in presentation mode. Not that you can see the search box, but okay. Oh, we've got some 2.0s. I wonder what that versus that is. There's a web framework that gives you blah 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 blah. Enables cleaning. Common action results, attribute routing, application model conventions, API Explorer, application parts, filters, formats, model binding, and more. Includes other things. I assume one depends on the other. Okay, so this is just a package that depends on other packages to bring in everything. I think. Let's view it on NuGet.org. Maybe we'll get the dependencies on that. Oh, that's pretty. SPNet core. Okay, versus that. I don't want razor pages, to be honest. Or nothing to do with rendering. Yeah, let's go for this one. Core into that project. Yes. Stop telling me about that. I know it's not fully supported. I like to live on the cutting edge of things. Okay. Now what? Maybe we can add things. .use. Oh, there's authentication. That might be useful. Database, default files, directory browser, file server, identity, middleware, MVC. Adds MVC to the records. Okay. Go to this link. Ah, they do it as well. Ah, routing, and then a control. Right, let's try with a root. Oh, presentation mode again. Oh, I actually prefer that. Easier on my old eyes. Roots. Nope, no IntelliType for me. Right. God, that's bright. Map root, default name template. Let's just copy that. Controller equals home, action equals index, and let's ignore the ID for the time being. Let's create a class, public class, home controller, MVC controller, is that a thing? Just guessing. API controller. Controller. Oh, that looks about right. Good. Public action result, maybe index, no parameters, return. You know, I'd quite like IntelliType. Maybe if I switch to a different view first. No, everything is going to hang now. I didn't click anything. Right. New. Nope. New JSON result. Is that a thing? Yes, it is. Taking some parameters of some form. Object value. Oh, shouldn't have hit that. Let's go new anonymous object message equals hello from MVC. Yeah, let's try that. Yeah, stop and rerun it. Doing nothing. Can't stop it, can't pause it, can't resume it. I don't think that's working. .NET has stopped working. Whoops. Right, let's our error message. Unable to find the required services. Please add all the required services. What is the required services? That's staggeringly unhelpful. Right. ASP.NET core to required services. Yes, it's definitely my font causing the problems and not my complete and utter ineptitude with this. It is a nice font though, you have to admit. Worth the slowness. Blah blah blah. No, I'm not doing that. No, that was unhelpful. How to configure IS. I don't want to do that. Just want to run the bloody application. Yes, you start up. Just a code block would be nice. Blah, blah. Right, let's try this. Unable to find required services, please. Oh, it does actually say right there in the error message. I can read. Services dot add MVC. I thought that was referring to this, not that. Add MVC versus use MVC. Obviously, I knew that. People used to say the same thing about Restful Wolfie. when we first got it, grumbling about the slowness, but you know, it was worth it. Oh, it works. Success. Good, I think. I really want to play with Jasper though, and I know that's going to be more painful because there's no documentation and it's not released yet. I'm going to chalk that up as a success for the evening. And stop there before I end up hurting my head more. Let's... What? Hit checkout B. ASP.NET. Gore. Save. Good. Git checkout master. Git push. Right. Buy a license. I had to click one button to get myself a rider upgrade. It cost me an extra €50 or something. That's fine. Means that I don't have to use Visual Studio and rely on guides online that just have lots of pictures of graphical boxes. Click here and click this. I don't want to click, I want to type. Yeah, so we've managed to implement projection running, and that's, I think, pretty much all of our event sourcing infrastructure done for the time being. Later we will need to implement something more persistent for storage, so probably something file system based, but a SQL store is probably a good idea. Yeah, and we've got MVC running-ish, but I might not use that because generally I've preferred Jeremy's frameworks to Microsoft's, so it would seem rude not to try it. But I think that's a task for another night, because that could be quite a rabbit hole of adventure. So yeah, that's it for this evening. Thank you for watching, and as usual, any questions or anything, feel free to send me messages on Twitter or have a look at the code on GitHub. Yeah, thanks everyone.